Welcome to part 4 of Team Strike's latest trip. I had to pause this series to go on another trip, that'll be out later, so let's recap. We went to the Bahamas, won some money, got kicked out of some casinos there, and then flew to Vegas. In day 1 of Vegas, we won some more money, but Irish got into some trouble where a casino didn't want to cash him. To see how that went, check out the previous episode. But now we're on to Vegas, day 2, where my good run was about to end. There are 2 different approaches to catching card counters. The first approach is for surveillance to be looking around, watching the tables, and when they spot a potential card counter, analyse their play to see if their bets rise with the count. Surveillance are very proficient at doing this. They don't need to be perfect card counters themselves to realise that someone is counting. With this surveillance first approach, other staff are not responsible for catching card counters. And then we have the pit boss first approach. Pit bosses are given the job to call surveillance when they suspect someone is counting. This guy's raised his bets, let me call the guys upstairs and get their game run down. I believe with this approach that surveillance aren't looking for card counters until they get that call. This approach isn't any better. There are actually some major disadvantages with this that I'm not going to point out here, don't need to give the casinos any tips, but it can, at times, catch counters faster. Back in Strike 2020, before I'd uploaded any card counting YouTube videos, I walked into Orleans, sat down, and at that moment, the pit boss looked at me and he just knew. He knew that I was a card counter, even though I hadn't done any counting yet. His eyes were saying, "Oi, I know you're about to count, and I don't like it." The moment I raised my bet, he called surveillance, and then, what felt like seconds later, I got backed off. Point being, I was thinking that this might be a short session. As a reminder, my current strategy was hit and run. Get in, play for a bit, leave, all before a back off. Back offs can have a bit of a ripple effect. If I could just keep dodging them, I'd be able to stack up a lot of time through short sessions. Orleans exclusively deals double deck. There's usually a few tables open, and the game quality is perfectly fine. The dealer must hit soft 17, you can double any 2 cards, and you can double after splitting. I wouldn't consider these rules good. I mean, more that if you couldn't double after splitting, that would be bad. The more cards dealt before a shuffle, the more valuable our counting becomes. Dealing 1 deck before a shuffle would generate about $165 per hour, but that amount goes up considerably for every few more cards dealt. Tasty. The good thing for counters is that dealing more cards is also good for the casino. Less time shuffling and more time dealing is more revenue. And it actually makes a shockingly big difference to a casino over the course of a year's worth of play. At 1¼ decks dealt-ish, I'd be generating approximately $270 per hour, potentially more on a fast table. Tasty. I just really want to say tasty. I don't know why. The first time increasing bets is always a little daunting. It's the moment you can attract attention. I was hoping the pit boss wouldn't see as I pushed out 2 hands of $150. Luckily for me, she didn't. But unluckily for me, I lost both hands as the dealer drew to 21. The next hand, I got an 11, so I doubled it. Another $150 on top of my $150 bet. I stood on my 14. We can't see what the dealer has, but we can see how I felt about it.
Wow, holy shit.
To make myself look less like a counter and more like a gambler, I dropped a hand and bet all my remaining chips on 1 hand. It looked like I was trying to change the flow of the cards. You've got to be careful using this kind of cover, because even though it may look less countery, in this case it increases variance. In other words, the game is more volatile. The dealer had an ace up, and I took insurance because the true count was well above a 2.5. If the dealer had blackjack, I'd break even on the hand. This is one of those rare cases where you're hoping that the dealer has blackjack. If the dealer didn't have blackjack, I'd lose $225, and still potentially bust the hands. Side note, it's crazy how many times I've had it where playing blackjack, where I've gone to take insurance and the dealer totally ignores me. You have to really assert that you want insurance, or at least that you're thinking about it. Many dealers brush past this question so fast that if you're not careful, you can miss out. Additional side note, unless you're counting, never take insurance. Even though the count was high, the dealer did not have blackjack. Ugh. Well, let's see if we can work with this 14. I got a 4 and ended up pushing with the dealer. I kept my eye on the pit boss. She was so busy with other things and wasn't watching me play, but that could change at any moment. Catching another high count, I bet 2 hands of approximately $400, my max. I could see the pit boss in the corner of my eye, but I couldn't tell if she was watching. If she was being subtle. The last thing I wanted to do was to accidentally make eye contact, so I kept my focus on the cards. The dealer had a 4, so I stood on my 13. My 8 against a 4 would normally be a hit, but as it was a true 6, it was a double. Another $325 on the table to double, and I was gifted a 10. Not too bad. If the dealer bust, this would be a much needed $1,075 win. The dealer drew a 10, best case scenario. But then, a 6, 20, Give me a break. After that loss, I saw the pit boss on the phone. If that call was about me, a back-off could be only a couple of minutes away. As we know, surveillance are fast here, but I hadn't had much attention from the pit boss so far. The call could be about anything. The good thing about wanting to chase your losses when you're counting is that you actually do improve your odds of winning the more you play. And I was feeling a bit tilted from my losses. I wasn't even having that bad a session, but some sessions just hit you more than others, and I was feeling a little bit annoyed. I took the gamble playing on, assuming I was still under the radar. But you know what they say about making assumptions? When the count rose in the next shoe, I won what I felt like was my first big hand all session.
Come on.
But in the next round, I bust my 13 and pushed on the other hand. There must have been a shift change because I saw more pit bosses walking around and some hushed conversations. I stood on a 20 in the next round and had to buy in for yet more money to double my 11. No joy there, my 20 held, but my double was a flop. At least I got to use my frustration to my advantage. Raising my bets made it look like I was chasing my losses and not raising them to chase the count. I bet 500 on one hand and 400 on another. Above our bet spread, but the count was high enough to justify it. Although, for the first time in the session, the dealer announced, "Let's play." This is a rule for dealers where if the player bets above a certain amount, the dealer has to announce it so the pit boss is aware. It's not so much a countermeasure, more just so the pit boss knows what's going on. But in this case, the pit boss being aware of my bets is not what I wanted. Up until this point, I wasn't sure if she'd been keeping an eye on me, but there was no denying it now. As she came over, I made an attempt to distract her from how much I was betting.
Excuse me, do you know what I'm in for now?
Asking her what I was in for shifts the focus over to how much I was losing and not the technique I was using to play. Pit bosses of course know that card counters can lose, but there's something psychologically disarming about a losing player. They just feel like less of a threat, so drawing her attention to my loss wouldn't hurt. I decided not to split my 10s against the dealer 4. 10 splitting against a 4 at a true 6 is positive EV, but I didn't want the additional attention that would bring. I was sure that if I split 10s, she'd be on the phone to surveillance, if she hadn't been already.
Come on, please. Finally a hand.
The dealer bust her hand, giving me a much needed win. A win the pit boss had seen. Damn. I reminded myself that the plan was to leave before being backed off. I was pushing my luck. I was losing, but all eyes were on me. The more I played, the more likely I'd get backed off. I decided to pry myself away from the blackjack table and come back that night. Despite the loss not being too major, it still bummed me out.
Well, I lost about 3k, but I didn't get a back off, so at least there's that.
Although I love card counting, it's not all upsides and there are a lot of disadvantages. I think it's important to know the pros and cons of being a counter before you learn. Otherwise you'll sink a load of time into something and then find out you don't actually like it. I put together a short free guide called Why You Probably Shouldn't Learn to Count Cards. If you're thinking about learning to count, you should absolutely read that before you do. It's linked in the description. I got lucky not getting backed off at Orleans. It was time to see if I could replicate that in an equally sweaty casino, Green Valley Ranch. Green Valley Ranch is a station's property. Much like Orleans, if they smell a counter, they'll make the call and run you down. Sitting down at the table, I tried my best to just act like a regular gambler.
Alright, how many hands was he doing?
Just one.
Alright, I'll do one and it stays the same.
As I mentioned before, many players get superstitious about the amount of hands being played at the table. If someone drops a hand or someone adds a hand, people believe it can affect the flow of the cards. So deciding how many hands to play based off what the previous player was doing looks very gambly. Gambly? Gamblery. It also makes me look like a team player because I care about the flow of the cards. Continuing with this act, I asked one dealer if double deck is usually dealt face down, and she looked at me like I had asked the dumbest question she'd ever heard.
Don't they normally deal that face down when it's two decks?
Face down?
Yeah.
How are you going to see your cards?
No, you pick them up.
I don't know how long it's been since you've been in the casino.
Less than an hour ago, where they dealt the cards face down. Well, the good thing is that this dealer now thought I was a total idiot, so at least she wasn't likely to consider that I was counting. Oh, damn. Never mind. I started to relax into playing, but shortly after, something happened that totally threw me off. A player joined the table, leaned over to me, and said,
How's it going?
Hey, Steve. Good to see you.
Thanks, man.
I'm surprised I was not talking.
Cheers, man.
Being recognised while playing, in what I thought was a decent disguise, totally threw me off. He did keep his voice low, but there is nothing more jarring than when I'm in a casino and I hear someone say my name. I then had to worry about whether this guy was going to blow my cover, not because he intentionally would, but you just never know how someone's going to act.
I think we need some kind of
We need to establish some kind of rule. Not kind of a rule. We need like a code word when someone recognises me. Like instead of saying, hello, Stephen, we say, oh, I really like your face. That's not a good one. Well, actually, screw it. If you see me in real life in a casino, come up to me and say, sorry, I just wanted to say, I really like your face.
I refocused, making sure the distraction hadn't thrown me off enough that I missed any cards, and continued to play. My variance at first wasn't any better than Orleans, losing hands, rebuying, and losing more hands. I did win an insurance bet, which is always satisfying, but the pit boss was aware. And when I put out 2 large bets, the dealer announced, I got a 17 on one hand and a 19 on the other. The dealer had 17. A win and a push, I'll take it. This hand did trigger the pit boss to walk off and make a phone call. My game was about to be run down, no question. But if I left now, hopefully they wouldn't bother. Meaning when I go back another day, as far as the casino were concerned, I'd be a regular player. It had been 20 minutes, and despite having a downswing of nearly 2k, I'd made a nice recovery.
Great. Thanks. Have a good one. Oh, is Renexit that way?
A quick team meeting, things had changed. Firstly, Syntax had joined us, and it was the first time he'd seen me in this disguise.
Man, you look awesome.
Thanks.
We have the same cap.
This is your cap.
He couldn't be on the first part of the trip due to other commitments, but he was here now. Syntax is arguably the strongest player on the team. He also has a terrible taste in wigs. Remember this image, it will become important later in the trip. We also added a guest, Spartan. If you're a card counter, you may know Spartan as one of the leading card counting trainers in the world. His test outs are legendary. I took one, I was terrified, but it was also very fun. Spartan agreed to join us to play for the remainder of the trip. So we had a Spartan on our side and a Syntax. Tasty. Up until this point, my focus was on a hit and run approach, but it was time to change tactics. Checking the essentials chat, Ultimate was getting more time than the rest of us. He was playing until a back off almost every time. Simply put, hit and run was making us less money than playing until a back off. So for the next casino, I'd play until they stopped me. Me and Irish decided to hit Orleans. Irish's new favourite game when we're hanging out is to pretend that he's me narrating a Beat the Odds video.
Me and the Irish and me went to Orleans. Irish was playing his typical friendly Australian act yet again.
Hanging out with the team had boosted my mood. My mood was further boosted by seeing Irish looking like this. People often comment that they think Irish is Scottish. Well, today, he was embracing that. Orleans was annoyingly busy, but I did eventually manage to grab a seat. It was nice to play without having to worry about heat. I was being watched, but I knew how the session would end, so it was just a case of how long it would take until I got there. I had a high count, so I placed 2 bets of $400. My first hand was something like a 12, and my second hand was a soft 17. The dealer had an ace, I took insurance. The dealer didn't have blackjack. Despite a high count, I somehow found the small cards and brought my total to 21. On my other hand, I drew a 5, 2, and a 3, 17. But unfortunately, the dealer flipped over a 9, a win and a loss, but overall a loss due to the insurance bet. But none of that is what concerned me. What concerned me is the second pit boss that had been watching, who after this hand, made a phone call. No doubt in my mind that the call was about me, but I wasn't about to stop playing. Nothing I did from this point would make much difference, so at times on a neutral count, I decided to reduce my bet down to one hand of $25. Given that I was going to get backed off, I might as well save on rent. I don't know at what point the pit boss got the all clear to back me off, but when he did something quite annoying. He waited for me to raise my bet before walking over to the dealer and getting her to hold off dealing. He then said to me,
Sure, you can pick your best, please.
it's a subtle screw you to the counter, deliberately letting them play when they have the disadvantage and then stopping them when they don't. Orleans just had to squeeze that extra 25 cents per hand in EV. Good for you, Orleans. I'm not bitter. The players at the table were a bit confused.
I think maybe they think I lost too much or something. They got a gaming responsibility.
I could have told them that the casino doesn't want you to play when you're going to win, but it wasn't the time.
Nice playing with you. Good luck.
Just when I thought we were done, the pit boss decided to really clarify that I was backed off.
Can't play blackjack here anymore, please. All right.
He's a busy guy, he doesn't waste time stopping. No. When this guy backs off a card counter, he does it when he's walking by. He's there and then he's gone. Like some kind of casino ninja. My result for the session was minus $1,512.50. Irish decided to leave when he saw my back off, losing $687.50. The day for me was a little underwhelming. I'd only played 3 casinos, and overall, I'd lost. My time for the day wasn't great, my money for the day wasn't great, but that's how it is sometimes when counting. Sometimes it's just showing up, tapping a table, not much happening, and going home. The next day would be a lot more eventful for me, both in ways I'd like and in ways I wouldn't. It's time for the team graph. My graph for the day is pretty lackluster. 3 sessions, 2 of which lost, fun times. The team overall had a bit of a dip before hitting a new trip high, but then things tapered off, ending with a few $100s less than the start of the day. One of the biggest risks to card counting is the use of facial recognition tech. I like to keep up to date with the legalities of this tech and its effectiveness. A story that caught my eye recently is how Rite Aid was banned from using facial recognition technology for surveillance purposes for 5 years after falsely accusing customers of crimes and unfairly targeting people of colour. Not the casino industry, but still relevant. I can see that 89 news sources covered the story, and 35% of them lean left, 49% centre, and 15% right. I can also see the ownership chart for those sources. It's interesting because even a story like this, which isn't that political, will still be told slightly differently depending on the political bias of the news source reporting it. I'm someone that values trying to be apolitical when it comes to the news, which is why I use Ground News. Ground News is a website and app that shows you the latest news, but with a breakdown of political bias, ownership, and factuality of news sources, backed by the ratings of 3 independent news monitoring organisations. I love the blind spot feature, which exposes stories heavily reported by only one side, helping me break out of my political bubble. Ground News has become my go-to source for news. For my viewers, they're currently offering 40% off their Vantage subscription. You can only get this discount from using my link. So go to ground.news/StephenBridges or click the link in the video description and support an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent.